Hi there, welcome back to my channel. My name is Regina and this is Our Gifted Garden. This is my first video of 2023 and I am excited to start with a full tour of my garden so far. So last year I showed you guys the whole process of me starting seeds, planting things out into the garden, all of that. Well, this year has been quite hectic, so I'm just now able to really get into videoing the things that are going on in my garden, but things have definitely been happening here. So I have everything planted for this season, but I'm still building some of my trellises, finishing things up, all of that good stuff. So I'll be bringing you guys along for some of that as well during this season, so be on the lookout for more videos. But I really wanted to get you guys just some insight into how things are going in the garden so far this year. Now, as far as my seed starting and all of that, I did pretty much the same process as I did last year, except I did start things a little bit later this season, mainly because I just kind of was running out of time and got things done a little bit later. So my pepper plants are a little smaller than they were when I put them out last season. My tomato plants as well. However, tomato plants grow incredibly quickly, so they were still plenty big enough to get planted out in the garden. The pepper ones were too, but I would have liked them to have been a little larger, so next season I will start those a little earlier. So I'm gonna walk around. I'll use my little handheld thing, so I'll try to keep the camera as steady as possible. It's not always easy, but I will do that. But before we get into the tour, go ahead and click that like button. That helps this video get out to more gardeners. It impacts the algorithm on YouTube, so I really appreciate that. And of course, if you're interested in more gardening content like this, I have a whole slew of videos on my channel, so if you have any questions about gardening, you will likely find some of those answered in my videos from last season already, so definitely go ahead and check those out. But also subscribe so that you'll be alerted every time I release a new video. I am growing in North Texas, Zone 8A. I am just outside of Dallas, so that's where I'm growing. And so just to give you some insight into my growing space, I live in a subdivision. I'm in a suburb of Dallas, so I live in a house with a regular backyard. I think our whole property is 1/4 of an acre, so standard issue. My backyard, I'm using I would say about half the space in my backyard to garden. I have a total of 6 4x8 raised beds, and then I have one 5x8 raised bed and one 4x12 raised bed. And then I also have a keyhole bed that is 12 feet on each side and then 12 feet across this way, and then with like an 8x4 foot cutout of it. So I have that bed as well. So I guess 10 total raised beds of varying sizes. And then I also have 4 6x1 foot raised beds against my fence where I grow climbing things. Like this year I'm growing green beans and cucumbers. So that's kind of the layout of my backyard. I also have a few containers in which I'm growing things. Like I have nectarine trees in containers. I have 2 mulberry trees in containers, but I will eventually put those in the ground. I should have done it last season. I did not, so fingers crossed that I get it done this season. And then I also have some muscadine vines growing in containers and blueberries growing in containers as well. So here's my garden, south to north. So furthest away from us is the north side, close to us is the south side. And in planting my garden, I do take that into account. I want the things that are going to be taller on the north side of the garden so they aren't producing too much shade. But honestly, y'all, this is Texas, and the sun is really high in the sky in the summer anyway. So even if there's shade on one side of something, it's still going to get sun at some point. So it's not that big of a deal, but I do take that into account. So here, in this first bed, for this year, this is my Determinate tomato bed. So I have all of my Determinate tomatoes in here, mostly Romas, but a few other varieties like Terracotta, which is a semi-determinate, and I think I have like an early doll and an early treat. I grew the early doll last year, and the early treat was a free seed packet I got from one of the places I purchased seed, and so I planted that. But I've only planted these plants. This bed has only been planted for a couple of days. But so far, so good. They're doing well. I have a marigold here. I don't put too many marigolds in my beds because they do take over. They get really big. So I have 2 in this bed, but I love the way they attract the pollinators and how pretty they are in the summer. And I also have a couple of zinnias and a snapdragon in here as well. And then here we have, it's like a Thai basil plant. And yeah, mix them with the tomatoes. So what I do with herbs, with most of my annual herbs, is I start seeds for them when I start my other seeds, you know, for tomatoes, peppers, etc. And I just put them into the little pockets of my garden where I have space. I just squeeze them in. So I don't really account for having a ton of space for them. I just squeeze them in. And I'm okay if they are kind of like, you know, in the midst of everything. These are some extra flowers that I have that I need to find a space for before they die. Okay, so in this bed, this is the next bed. Let me move so you don't have my big shadow. Okay, so in this bed, this is the second southernmost bed. This one is my pepper bed, but it also has tomatoes. A lot of the beds on this side of the garden do have tomatoes growing. Last year for my indeterminate tomatoes, I just used 1 bed for all of them. This year I'm doing it a little bit differently, and I'm putting them alongside one of the sides in multiple beds, in 3 different beds. So here I have mostly peppers. As you guys know, I grow a variety, if you've seen my channel before, I grow a variety of peppers. Same thing this year, lots of sweet peppers, lots of, a few hot peppers, but I prefer obviously sweet and bell peppers because those are more helpful in my cooking. And then I also have eggplant. Last year I grew 2 varieties. This year I have Rosita, Black Beauty, White Knight, and Green Knight, I believe. Yeah. Those are the types of eggplant that I'm growing. And then here, these are tomatoes. These were planted maybe a week ago. And I do have a challenge here going on with this one. Not sure what that is, but I'll be pruning off the affected leaves. And then this one looks like a pest got to it, and it almost looks like it bit off the growing tip, which is annoying. But if you see, suckers kind of grow in those little armpits where the branches are off of the main stem. So I'm going to leave it in hopes that a sucker will grow, and I'll get a new main stem out of that plant. But yeah, these are all indeterminate tomatoes. Several different varieties. So I'm doing a full garden, so I probably won't go through all of them, but I'll show you some of the different varieties we have here. Pro Fruity Cherry. I love super sweet cherries. I have a Cherokee Purple here. Isis Candy, Cherokee Purple, Pro Fruity Mandarin, Sweetheart, and Honeycomb Hybrid. And so I am actually building a trellis for these. I'll show you what it's going to look like because I have one that's mostly built, or part of the way built. But I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use a string trellis instead of the long furring strips this year, just to try it out and see what it'll be like. But yeah, that's what's happening in this bed. Also, I started my seeds kind of late this year, so they only had like 4 weeks to grow indoors, and which is why my pepper plants are a little smaller than usual. Next year, the tomatoes, 4 weeks is perfectly fine. But for the peppers, 6 weeks I think is a little better to get my plants just a teeny bit bigger before I have to bring them out here. Mainly so that they can stand up a little better to pest pressure. I mean, right now they're doing fine, but, you know, just in case. Now this bed, also I wanted to point out, these 2 beds that I just showed you, last year both of these beds were used for field peas in the summer garden, so southern peas, which I used a soil inoculant, which meant that helped the peas make all of their own nitrogen and possibly leave some in the soil, which was nice. But I did top all of my beds with compost as well. And this bed also was used for onions before it was used for peas last year. So I did kind of swap out where things were this year in my garden. I don't do it every single year, but I did it this year. This bed, notice I have tomatoes along the side. This one is actually, most of my beds are 4x8. This one is actually a 5x8. Don't recommend it. It's a little bit too wide. 4x8 is better, but on the edge I have my tomatoes, more indeterminate tomatoes that I'm going to trellis. And here, so I can do it without a shadow of me, I have a sun sugar, 2 sun sugars, a sun peach, a and 2 Casaluto Genovese. So a mixture of cherry and, you know, full-size tomatoes or beefsteak-sized tomatoes, whatever, slicers. And then in here, I have ground cherries. Now my ground cherry plants, these actually grow really slow. I'm going to have to start these like 12 weeks ahead of time because this one has gotten eaten up because it was so small. And then I have 2 more there. So I'm actually just going to drop some seeds in here as well for ground cherries because I had 2 more plants and they're dead because of pests. So I'm just going to drop some seeds around here so I can get some more ground cherry plants going. I love ground cherries. Last year I grew them in containers and it did not work out well because I just could not keep all of those containers moist enough and it was just a whole mess. So I decided to devote some bed space to them this year because we love them. My kids love them. Well, 2 out of 3. This is an onion and it was here. I planted this here last year. Actually, it was an extra onion I had and I guess somehow I didn't harvest it. I guess I didn't notice it. And so it's still here. And so I'm going to leave it just to see if it'll go to seed and I can get some onion seeds from it. It looks like a yellow onion or a white onion. It has a nice bulb too. That's interesting. But this was planted last year. Here is some spicy globe basil. And then over here are my tomatillos. These plants actually grow a lot faster than the ground cherries, even though they're very similar. But yeah, I have purple and green tomatillos. So excited to have a lot of those. These also I did in containers last year, and it just didn't work out. It was too hot. All right, and here I do have some parsley, cilantro. I can never tell them apart in the wild. That's sad, as long as I've been gardening. Definitely parsley. Italian parsley. And marigold here. And then over here I started some rosemary from seed this year, and hopefully it'll grow nicely here and stay. I keep having to replant it. It never survives. I've had it in containers. I had it in a raised bed one year, but it just didn't get big enough before the winter came. So hopefully here, in between my lavender and my thyme, both of which have been here since 2020, it'll thrive, and I can have a permanent rosemary here as well. Okay, so now, sorry if the camera's shaky, y'all. I'm trying. Okay, so next to this bed is actually a 4x12 bed. It's the only 4x12 bed I have out here. I built it, I think I started with strawberries in it, and there's still some in here. I left a few of the plants. There's some strawberries in there. But right now it's mostly onions and grass that I have failed at keeping at bay. But yeah, these are my onions. I have red Creole Texas onions, as well as white. Gosh, I'll put the varieties on this screen. I don't remember, but I have yellow, white, and purple or red onions growing here. Here in North Texas, we grow short day onions. I started these from seed. I want to say November. I was actually kind of late starting them. Y'all, I was late with everything. This year has just been hectic, which is why you guys haven't heard from me in a while. And I got them out here in the garden at the end of January, or maybe it was like the first week of February. I don't remember. But they actually have started bulbing. You can see here. And I actually bought a few of these plants. Most of these are ones I grew from seed, but I did buy a few plants just because I happened to be at Lowe's and they had onion bunches, and they were very, very inexpensive, like $3 for like 25 plants. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take these home. And so I put these in here as well. And so I had them planted, and then I dog sat for my brother, and his dog dug up like a third of my onions. So I had to come out and replant them. So some of them are a little bit behind because they were not happy about that. But yeah, these are my onions. And the last 2 years, they have been ready for harvest the first week of June. So I'm expecting the same this year. And then once this bed is cleared of onions, I'm not going to grow anything for the summer. I'll save it, get it ready, and use it for my fall stuff, like kale, spinach. Because I've run into the issue where, because our growing season is so long here, we don't get a freeze to December, sometimes January. I don't end up having space sometimes for my fall stuff if I don't plan it, because my summer stuff won't be done yet. Okay, and then this bed is another 4x8. And on the side, on the edge there, those are the tomatoes. It's also evening time, so they're getting a little bit of shade right now. Right now it is 5:15 p.m. And so they're getting a little bit of shade from the house, but most of the day they're getting all of the sun. But yeah, tomatoes on the edge, more indeterminate varieties. These have been planted the longest. I grew all of these from seed, started them at the same time, but I planted my garden out in phases just with the time I had. And so these have been in the bed the longest, and you can tell they're the biggest and the healthiest looking. So the varieties of tomato I have in this bed are, we have Sweetie. I haven't grown these before, but figured I'd give them a try. I have another Sun Peach in here, another Isis Candy, a Yellow Pear, and a Honeycomb. So one thing I did try to do this year was not have tomatoes where the fruit looks super similar right next to each other, because I had a hard time last year once they really got going telling like the honeycomb from the Isis Candy or the mandarin, because they were right next to each other, and the vines toward the end ended up getting all crisscrossed because they got so big. So I kind of purposefully put ones that were different next to each other. Like I have a Sun Peach over in another bed as well. But yeah, so that, like, I know the difference by looking at between a Sun Peach and an Isis Candy and a Yellow Pear. So it won't be hard for me to tell the difference. Now, Isis Candy does look a lot like honeycomb, but they're not right next to each other. Also in this bed, I have garlic. I have garlic growing here. I planted this back in October. I have garlic in another part of my garden too. But yeah, I use part of this space for garlic. And I also have these dwarf tomatoes here. These are what size are these? These are called Dwarf King. I wanted to try out dwarf tomatoes. Like, these are plants that aren't supposed to get big at all. Not even like determinate tomato size. Like, they say small and compact, but supposedly they produce a large amount of fruit in a very small space. So I'm just excited to give those a try. And then I also have peppers and eggplant in this bed. Several varieties of peppers, sweet, hot. I'm growing Purple Beauty this year. Cubanelles, Marconis. I don't know. So many. And then I also have some eggplant here. And then, of course, basil sprinkled in. There's some there. There's a marigold plant. So, yeah. All kinds of things happening in this bed. And this is the one that's right next to the onion bed. Also, if you take a look, there is in those pots, I have basil and mint. And those have also been growing since 2020. So, perennial herbs are kind of my flavor. I'm enjoying those a lot. Something you'll notice here in my backyard, as you can see, doing a lot of work here, putting down all this weed block fabric. But anyways, the next bed is this one. This one has field peas. Let me get to the side. Oh, actually, before that, I want to show you guys. So here is one of the trellises that I'm working on for my tomatoes. So it's just 2x2s and connected with like a metal bracket piece. I have zip ties on there, but that's just like extra support. They're actually screws from the metal piece into the wood, holding it together. And then I'm going to use string, like the kind of string that comes on a spool, so I can kind of lower and lean the tomato plants. Because we do have such a long growing season, my tomatoes, you know, they probably grow 10, 12 feet long. They grow so long. They're always outgrowing those stakes, which is why I wanted to try something different. And we'll see how this goes. Because at least with the string, I can lower it a little bit, and it'll be out into that area outside the bed. But I can kind of lean the plants and get a little bit more length out of them before letting them get unruly, like it always ends up happening. So I'm in the process of building the other two for the other two beds where I have indeterminate tomatoes. And that's why I have wood out here and my post pounder thing and all kinds of stuff. I'm just doing a lot of work out here. And I'll be using my old stakes. I'm not getting rid of, whoa, almost died. And these are the stakes that I used last year for my tomatoes, for my indeterminates. And notice how the bottom of them, where it was in the soil, is starting to rot because it's my second year using them. So I'm just going to get my saw and cut off that part. And then I'll use these stakes for my determinate tomatoes and peppers because I'll be trellising them with floor to weave method. And so I'll use these as the stakes for those. Alright, so here I have a pot with sage. This is also from last year, maybe 2 years ago. I don't remember. Maybe it's last year. I don't know. Sage, and there's a little thyme in there as well that I planted last year. Didn't have anywhere to put it, so I just put it in this pot with the sage. And the sage is blooming, but it's doing great. And here are 2 more dwarf tomatoes I'm putting in containers. I'm going to keep these kind of close to the house, so maybe I can keep up with watering them a little bit better. So next up we have one of my beds of field peas. I'm growing a few different varieties. Field peas or southern peas is what they are called. They're peas that grow and you have to shell them. If you live in the South, you're probably very familiar with them. If you don't, you may or may not be, but an example of a field pea are black-eyed peas. That's one type. But I don't grow those. I grow other varieties that I prefer. These are actually pretty difficult for me to find in the stores out here, so a couple years ago I started growing them myself, and I have never looked back. I usually devote 2 raised beds to them. So, these field peas I direct sow. So I just put seeds directly into the ground a few weeks ago, and they're going. I also have some grass growing. As you can see, I definitely need to mulch. I just have not done that yet. I need to get out here and pull this out. But I'm just trying to make it work, y'all. Here's my other bed of field peas. There you go. Alright, now here on my fence, I built these beds last year out of fence pickets from a fence we had taken down. And these 4 I've set up, and I made these little, I'll show you guys. It's like wire. I have a video on my channel on how I made this, but it's wire connected across the bottom of the fence poles, and then I use string. Most of the string I've already cut from last year because it just, you know, was wound up in the plants, etc. So I left a few of them that were okay. So I have to come back out here and retie more string, but the rest of the trellis is intact. And in these beds, I have, as you can see, these are pole beans. This one is called Big Kahuna. As you can see, something out here munching on my peas, but you know what? You can have a few leaves. Just let my plants grow. Out here, these are a different variety. I think these are Blue Lake. Yeah, Blue Lake pole beans. These are already starting to vine out. So I gotta get out here soon and get my strings going. These are some yard-long beans. Do not have as good of a germination rate on these. I don't have as many plants, but that's alright. And then these are actually cucumber. I want to try growing cucumbers on the string like this just to see if it'll support them. So I have some cucumber plants out here as well. So we'll see how this goes. So these are all along the fence, as you see, 4 of these beds. Okay, so back at my second bed, that's raised bed, that's field peas. Here I have my arch trellis, and this trellis is made of 2 8-foot cattle panels or hog panels, whatever you want to call them. This has been up for now. This is the 3rd year it's been up. It is doing great. It's a very strong trellis. I have grown watermelons on this trellis and cantaloupes. It is strong. It holds weight. Obviously, for the watermelon and cantaloupe, I have to create like a little cradle for them. But otherwise, it's fine. And so on this trellis, I'm growing green beans. Some of them are getting eaten, though, and it is very sad. Look, I'm going to show you guys. Something is eating them right here at the base. And so I put out some more seeds to hopefully grow some more, and I can just kind of like grow enough beans that whatever is eating them just doesn't get to all of them before they get strong. And I'm also growing cucumber here, some Armenian cucumber, as well as a few other varieties. So same thing on this side, Armenian cucumber at the end, and then green beans here. And now in this bed, this is okra. I actually grew okra in this bed last year. This is the one bed that hasn't changed. I just decided to keep it here. It's on the north side of the bed. It gets really tall. Next year I'll probably put it somewhere else just to switch it up, because okra is a heavy feeder. It loves nitrogen, but I amend the soil with compost each year, and I use plenty of fertilizer, so it should be okay. But yeah, my okra, I also direct sow okra, and it has come up, and you know, once it gets going, it gets going. So I will have to thin out these plants. I do 1 per square foot, but I like to let them get a little bigger, so that way if there are any of the plants that I need to, like, you know, like if I have a seed that doesn't come up somewhere, then I can move some of the plants around rather than just throwing them away. So I like to let them get a little stronger, and then I'll keep the strongest one in each square foot. Here I have my 2 nectarine trees. They had some blooms on them earlier, but I don't see any fruit, so I don't know. Oh, there's a ladybug in there. I don't see any fruit here, so I don't know what happened, because I have plenty of bees in my yard. Who knows? But yeah, so my nectarines. And here are my blueberry bushes. I do have some blueberries grown in. This is a powder blue. This one's also a powder blue. Here I have I want to say this one is a Titan. I have a few berries growing on it. And this one is I have 2 in here, Ochlocone and something else. 2 varieties in this pot. Some berries coming in. And then this one is a Premier. Oh! And so right now these guys are just, I have them in pots because, as you know, blueberries require acidic soil. And so that's the best way for me to keep it that way. So here is my last raised bed. This one is kind of the wildest one. I need to get in here and do a lot of work. I need to clean out. There are weeds growing in and around my trees. I got all kinds of things happening in here. But this bed is try to get you a good view. It's essentially a 12 by 12 by 12. It's a keyhole bed with the middle cut out. And in here I have fruit trees. So here are 2 apple trees. I just planted these trees last season, and they were tiny, like sticks. And so I have a lot of weeds and stuff grown in there. This isn't weeds, this is garlic, FYI. But I mean, aside next to the trees. And then there are my plum trees. I have 2 plums, 2 peaches, and 2 cherries. I think my peach tree has a couple of peaches growing on it, and my plum, one of my cherry trees is like a cherry. I haven't seen any plums. I didn't get a lot of blooms this year, but this is my 2nd year with these trees. I did not shape them or anything this winter. It was a crazy winter, y'all. So I figure I'll just let them grow through the season, and then in the winter I will cut them back and shape them how I want them, so that they're able to grow here really well. I have 2 of each variety because I purchased trees that would grow well in this climate, and I also purchased trees that would pollinate each other. So that's why I have 2 of each. And I'm planning to keep them really small to grow well in this area. So I have a lot of pruning to do, but mainly I gotta get in here and clean out the weeds and get some fresh mulch down and just clean this area out. Also in this bed, like I showed you guys, I have lots of garlic. This is where most of my garlic is growing. Like I mentioned earlier, I planted this back in October. It's doing really well. I don't remember when it was I harvested my garlic last year. I don't remember when it was that I harvested my garlic last year, but when like half of the leaves are brown, like this, then that's about when it's ready. So still have a while to go on this garlic. And this year's garlic crop was actually planted. I did a video actually when I planted this, but it was planted using bulbs from last year. So I actually didn't have to buy any garlic to plant. So it's like self-seeding. And then here I did plant some beets a little while ago because I didn't do a winter garden. Just didn't get out here and do it. I started some seeds for some, then I just never ended up getting my beds ready. But I did come out here and sow some beet seeds. Just direct sowed them a while back. And so I do have some beets growing because I love beets and I was really sad to not have those. So I do have these growing here. And I also have a lot of volunteer shiso from the plant I had in here last season. So much of that. And I've moved a few plants around to some beds to grow in so I can keep some of it. And basil and stuff popping up. And now here is where I have, this is a raspberry plant that I thought it kind of died back, but is back in full effect and spreading. And then these are my blackberry bushes. My blackberry bushes are going wild. I did not prune them over the winter because I want to let them, you know, these are Primark Freedom blackberries. And so Primark Freedom are primocane fruiting thornless blackberry, which means they fruit on both first year and second year canes. So this early crop that we're seeing, see some of these blackberries are starting to turn black. There are so many blackberries, y'all. So I'm going to move the camera around and give you guys a look. There's so many. But the first year, so this crop we're seeing, these are the floricane berries. So they're fruiting on last year's canes. And so once these are all ready and black and harvested, then I will prune these back quite a bit. And later on in the season, throughout the season, but also in the fall, I'll start getting berries on these new canes that are coming up. So here are the muscadines. They are growing in containers. I put them in containers because I just wasn't sure if this was where I wanted to keep them. And I didn't think it through, and I didn't put the bottoms on it because now the bottoms of the containers, the roots have grown through the holes in the bottom into the ground. So I cannot move them now without destroying or disturbing the plant. So I'm not going to do that anyway. But as you can see, there are so many little buds on these plants. Okay, let's wait for it to focus. There it is. So many. Last year I got quite a few, but just from one of these plants. The other one didn't really produce. But this year, I have buds on both of them. And so many, y'all. Muscadines don't ripen until the fall. Or, yeah, until about September. Late August. So we have quite a ways to go. But it's really exciting. Now we're going to get some really great fruit. I didn't really have a big issue with birds eating my fruit last year. So hopefully it doesn't become an issue for me. And here are my mulberry trees. They're dwarf mulberries, and the mulberries are tiny, but delicious. There's some right there that are red, and when they're black, my kids have started coming out here and finding them and eating them because they are really delicious and sweet. Here's one. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed getting to see what's happening in my garden, and maybe there were some things that inspired you or some tips that you picked up. Either way, please leave a comment. Leave any questions that you have. I'll be happy to answer those. And of course, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that like button, and you can subscribe to the channel. Those are the easiest and simplest ways to support the channel. I also have some Amazon links below of some products that I use in my garden or for seed starting. So go ahead and check those out if there's anything that you are interested in. The channel does receive a small commission from any purchases that you make using those links, but it doesn't cost you any more. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.